So, since it's Halloween, I'm going to do something scary. Instead of talking about three themes today, I'm going to talk about four. But don't worry, the four will take the same amount of time as three. John the Evangelist was one of the 12 apostles, and he knew Jesus so well and was so close to Jesus that he was often referred to as the beloved disciple. And in his letter to the Christian community, he challenged us on love. He said, "How can you claim to love the God you cannot see when you do not love the brother or sister you do see?" And so the challenge of the gospel today is not only to love God, but even more difficult measure, to love our neighbor as ourself. And so I want to give you four things, and I'm going to give you four words to go with them. So the first is enemies. The second one is initiative. The third is concrete. And the fourth is least. All right? So enemies, initiative, concrete, and least. So first, enemies. And we know in Matthew 5, Jesus challenges us all to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us. And so when we think about that, of course, most days we say, well, I don't really have enemies, but I'm pretty sure most of us have people who have hurt us at one time or another. And sometimes maybe we've even encountered people who have intended us harm, people who actually had malice. And so the challenge of loving our enemies is really to look at those that we would rather not have anything to do with and try to understand what it means to love them. And of course, what it does not mean is loving our enemies doesn't necessarily include having a relationship with them. If you take, for example, an abusive situation, if someone is abusive, we have to love them, but having a relationship with them is probably not wise, probably not even a good thing to try. But to love means to will the good of the other. To love another person doesn't always involve a relationship, but it does involve a will, a desire for that other person's good. Now, that doesn't mean that I want them to win the lottery. It doesn't mean that I want them to get a promotion at work. What it means is I want what is good for them. Maybe their conversion, maybe their salvation. And so to will the good of the other is important, because what it prevents us from doing is harboring resentment and vengeance, because spiritually those are poison to us. And so if for no other reason, loving our enemies is spiritually beneficial to us. It's important for us because it allows us to let go of that desire to settle the score. It allows us to let go of that feeling of wanting the other to feel the pain that I felt. And that's important for us because love can only exist when we will the good of the other. And enemies is the biggest test of that. Now, the other one is the initiative. You know, in loving, oftentimes we encounter conflict. Now, spouses, husbands, and wives, I'm sure at one time or another you may have had a disagreement with each other. There may have been a time where the other person irritated you, and you were sitting there waiting for them to come and apologize to you because, of course, they were completely wrong. But love actually challenges us to take the initiative, to be the first one to reach out. Now, of course, that doesn't feel good because they were wrong, they should apologize. And you're absolutely right, they were completely wrong, they should apologize. But by taking the initiative, what we demonstrate is a willingness to open a door, a willingness to be the first to reach out. Not because we were wrong, but because we love. And then to be concrete. You know, being concrete is important in love because a lot of times we say very easily, I love you. And that's great. But we also need to show love in concrete ways. So I'm not going to ask for you to raise your hands, but how many of you right now can picture your kitchen garbage can overflowing? Probably a few. Now, of course, our kitchen garbage can usually gets stuffed down repeatedly until it can no longer be stuffed down again. And then finally, one of us has to crack. We have to be willing to empty the garbage can. Now, you could do it in a resentful way. You could say, why doesn't anybody else know how to take out the garbage? Or you could say, this is an act of love. I can take out garbage as an act of love. Or I can go get the mail as an act of love. It's concrete, it's simple, it's small, but it's a difference of how it's done. Can we make our love concrete enough so that the things we do during the day, instead of becoming tasks or burdens, become concrete acts of love? And then we have the last one, which is the least. You know, in Matthew 25, Jesus says, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done for me. And so when we look at the least, those who live on the margins, those who struggle, those who don't have an ability to fully participate in the common life, when we love them, we participate in loving the Lord Jesus himself. Now, I'm going to tell a story on myself because this week we had our priest retreat and it was great, and we were coming back into town Thursday afternoon, and I knew we had no food in the house. And so I thought, okay, I'll go to the grocery and I'll get a bunch of stuff so that we've got food through the weekend. And I did, and I loaded up the cart, and I got all kinds of stuff out of the frozen food section that's easy to cook. And I'm pushing my cart, and it was at Kroger, just down the road, and it was pouring rain, and so I had parked my car at the very end so I could stay under cover all the way out to the car. And so I'm going down the sidewalk towards Chick-fil-A, and I'm staying under cover, and there's this gentleman in front of me who's kind of aimlessly walking, and he's muttering expletives the whole way he's walking. And I could tell he probably was either homeless or maybe struggling materially. And of course, the thought came to me, I really need to take this guy over to Chick-fil-A and just see if he's hungry. And of course, I knew that was the right thing. I knew I should have done that, but then I thought about the frozen food. And then I thought about the rain. And then I heard him mutter even more expletives. And I thought, I don't think I can do this right now. And I took the coward way out. I got in my car and I went home. But I know that I should have loved. I should have tried to do something. I should have reached out. Because I know when we do, we recognize the person of Jesus Christ. When we recognize in the least of our brothers and sisters, those who live on the margins, those who life is burdensome, when we reach out, we touch Christ himself. And loving is what we're challenged to do, and it is not easy, and we fail. In fact, we fail pretty much on a daily basis to love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's precisely why we gather together here, not because we are champions of love, but because we are people who know our own need for love. We are people who recognize that unless we are fed by the hand of the Lord on the scriptures and the Eucharist, that we will be completely incapable of growing deeper in love. And so we gather here together as sinners, as people who fail to love the way that we should each time, but also believing that the love of God that fills us, the love of God that we celebrate here, prepares us to go back out, to attempt to live the love of Christ in our lives, and to love our neighbor as ourselves.